so we're going to jump to number 4, and let's work on this one together right here on this video. Let's take a look at the top equation. Let's take a look at that top equation. Let's pretend that it's a y equals -1. Okay, and let's actually graph that since there is no x value. Now when I say top equation, I'm saying like, look at this one up here. This is like a y equals -1. I did it in red. I'm going to draw it in red over here so you could identify it. So y equals -1, that's really a flat line, a horizontal line, has no slope, and it intercepts the y-axis at -1. So I want to put a dot right here at -1, and I know that it's going to be going in both directions. Hopefully you're using a pencil right here so you could erase it. It's going in both directions. It's a flat line. But before I draw it, I want to look at my restriction, my domain value for this piece that says if x is less than or equal to -1. So I really don't want anything that's greater than -1. I don't even want the 0 or the +1 or the 2 or the 3 or the 4 or the 5. I only want -1 and less. So -1 and less is that way. And that's the piece that we want. And that's a solid dot right here, guys. Okay, let's move on to the next one. I want to do the next one in blue. It's going to say y equals 1. Yeah? For this middle one right here. Y equals 1. And I did it in blue. Now that's going to be the horizontal line crossing the y-axis at 1. So here's a dot at 1. Let me just draw some dots in both directions. Hopefully you're doing this with a pencil so you could erase it later. And now let me look at my restriction. My restriction says that your x values, the piece that you want, is going to be on your x values that are between -1 and +1. You need to know what this means, -1 and +1. So you want to, here's -1 on the x, here's +1 on the x. So you only want this little tiny piece right here. You don't want anything on the outside. You only want from -1 to +1. So let me go back and erase, if I could. Oh man, I'm not going to be able to erase. Okay, I want to delete it this way. Sorry. So we only want from -1 to +1 and draw the segment. And not only that, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to have 2 open circles because they don't have the or equal to. So you're going to have an open circle there and an open circle here, and you're going to draw the segment, and that's your piece right there. And now for the final one, I want to draw this last one in, say, orange. Y equals x. I'm saying y equals the third one x. So we're going to have y equals x. And that's telling you that it's going to cross the y-axis where? What's the b value? At 0. And from 0, what do?
You go up and then you go up 1.
Up 1 over 1? Now, if I do go up 1 over 1, it's going to fill in that hole.
True.
Right? And I want to keep going up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1. And I'm just going to keep drawing those dots. And let's look at our restriction. What does it say? It says x is greater than 1. So I don't want the 0 value. So I'm going to erase this 0 value right here. And of course it doesn't erase. Horrible. Let me try to do something else. Have white out. Okay. So anyway, we do want greater than 1. So it's going to be an open dot at 1 if I'm thinking about the orange one, and then greater than is to the right. So that would be my third piece. Now it's important to remember that it was an open dot on the blue right here. It was an open dot on the blue right here and on the orange. So you need to be able to show that that's an open dot right in there. Does that make sense? Okay. So now let's even take this a step further, and let's talk about the entire f of x function, the whole thing, this whole thing. And let's talk about domain and range of f of x. Okay? So if I say, what is your domain of f of x? You're going to say x what? You're saying that x is greater than -1. So here's -1, greater than is to the right. What happens in terms of x? all real numbers, right? Now, you could write that, x equals all real numbers, but you gotta be careful if there's any holes, any gaps. Is there any missing values? For example, right here, this is an open dot, but this solid dot takes care of it. But this guy right here, there's an open dot on both, so you would have to say that x cannot equal 1. And I would also throw the word but right in front of there. But x cannot equal 1. So yeah, you're talking about every single number that exists except for the value of 1. Now let's talk range. Yeah, let's talk range. Range are your y values. So is there any part of this graph that's at -4 on the y?
No.
-3 on the y?
No.
-2 on the y?
No.
-1 on the y? Yes. Is there any at 0 on the y?
No.
No. How about 1 on the y?
Yeah.
2 on the y?
Yeah.
3, 4, 5, 6. So what are we going to say about the range? The range of f of x is y has to be what?
Greater than -1.
Y equals -1, or y is greater than or equal to 1.
Can you say it again? The y.
Wouldn't it be greater than?
It would be greater than if it had no values at 1. Now, so if we look at the y's, yeah? Once again, let me ask you, does it have any y values at, does it have any y values at -4?
No.
At -3? At -2? At -1? Yes, right? So you have to say, hey, there is y values at -1. There is no y values at 0, right? Is there a y value at 1? There actually is. In other words, look, if I zoom in, there's a coordinate that exists. And the coordinate, if I look at this one, it's the coordinate 0, 1. So there is a y value of 1. So that's why your y value has to be greater than or equal to 1. Okay, so please work on this assignment. Check out the other videos. They will be posted on Edmodo.